Hello and welcome to TechPowerUp 2.0. My name is Shashanka Bhattacharya and I'm going to be talking about how you can prevent attacks by protecting your applications using Azure Active Directory. So we will be starting off by talking about why Azure Active Directory to protect your applications. We will move on to the different types of applications. We will also talk about how you can protect all of your applications under Azure Active Directory. And throughout the session and even towards the end, I will be sharing quite a few resources and next steps. So as partners, you can take this and carry on the journey forward for your customers. Now, given today's time frame, in the last 2 years especially, what we've seen is our workforce has become very, very dispersed, and communication mechanisms have changed quite a bit. Now, when you think about a scenario like this, you would definitely think about how do I make sure that I keep my security benchmark where I need to be for my organization. So for my organization, if I think about it now, different people are accessing different applications from different places, but I still want to keep the same security portfolio. This becomes a challenge if you do not have a singular control mechanism. An identity is that particular control plane. Through identity, you are controlling who gets access to what and under what conditions, right? So one of the first things in terms of a zero trust journey becomes a consolidation of identities into a singular source of truth. Once you have a singular source of truth, then you can start implementing higher conditional access or higher security benchmarks on top of this source of truth. Now, why Azure Active Directory specifically? Now, of course, when we think about Active Directory, we know that it is very, very resilient. Your business continuity plans cannot have a component that can cause you a lot of downtime, right? So that is where Azure Active Directory plays a good part in terms of its resiliency. In terms of security, you get all the goodies that Azure Active Directory has to provide. For instance, you would know it's real-time detections, right, based on risks. And with that, it becomes very, very useful, a tool for IT as well, to use Azure Active Directory to go ahead and ensure that the security benchmarks are kept up. From a user perspective, as end user, it makes it very, very easy to access all these applications, and it is absolutely seamless, right? So it becomes easy, and it is hassle free at the end of the day, and so that I do not have to keep bugging my IT over and over again for different access requests and things like that for different applications separately. This is a seamless mechanism, and especially at this point of time for work from home scenarios, this becomes absolutely crucial. Finally, this has to make financial sense. We are talking about how you can reduce costs using Azure Active Directory. Now, if you think about a very simple scenario from a work from home equation, if you have a private application that requires access, the way you would do it is through VPN. So you would have to have VPN tunnels created. You would have to have VPN clients installed in all of these endpoints. You will have to maintain the clients and the server side of the equation as well, for in order for a person to go ahead and access that particular private application. Now, by absolutely taking away all those components and opening it up for a user so that they can use their own internet to connect to this application while maintaining the security benchmark, that makes a lot of sense when you're talking about work from home, and it makes a lot of sense when you're trying to reduce costs, right? So all of those maintenance costs are vanished in an instant when you're looking at things like Azure Application Proxy. Now, from a user's perspective, the other reason why you would definitely need to do the consolidation and why you would need to have a singular source of truth is this. From an end user perspective, I mean, all of us have done it, right? I'm very sure you and me, both of us, at some point of time in our lives, have had the same password for multiple different applications. And not just corporate applications, it could be social media logins as well. And that becomes a big threat. In terms of, if you think about, let's say, a post-breach scenario, let's say there has been an attack, right? It becomes that much more harder if, first of all, your applications have their own identities, and you have to, from an IT perspective, you'll have to get logs from every single application, put them all of them together, and then figure out how the hack happened, right? And that makes it very, very hard, and you do not have the capability like Azure Active Directory gives you for real-time detections. So this is a behavior change that has been tried, but here's the thing: we need to start moving away from passwords and go into passwordless. I'll talk to you a little more about that in the following slides. Azure Active Directory becomes the singular plane of control across the environment, from everything to do with accessing your laptop, to accessing your files, to accessing your different applications. Because you have a singular source of truth, you can also know how the signals are traversing. This becomes very, very important because it also unifies other applications on top of it. Like for data security, you can talk about AIP being on top of it, or if you're looking at how communications between different SaaS applications, you can talk about MCAS being on top of it, right? So Azure Active Directory is absolutely crucial for this particular journey into zero trust. Now, conditional access is one of the things that, obviously, when we talk about Microsoft 365, we definitely talk about conditional access. And conditional access is a cornerstone in terms of how you would define access control. Right now, you would want to extend this to all of your applications, right? Not just under Microsoft as such. Could be for your third-party applications. Could be under a private cloud. Could be a private application on premise, for instance. And you would want to extend this conditional access equivalency for all of them, right? All of the signals being analyzed, and then you have the control mechanism as to what exactly needs to be done depending on where you're logging in from, who you are, what is the risk that you have when you're logging in into this, what application are you using, and are you using a browser or a client. All of these signals together make up an access request, and that access request can be judged in terms of what exactly is the risk that poses, and then given access to it, right? So at the entry level itself, it is I do not trust any single access request coming in, and you would want to have this extended to all your applications if you would want to go ahead with zero trust as the mechanism or as your framework that you want to follow. Now, one of the things, if you're talking about from Azure Active Directory perspective and identity perspective, is looking at how, in terms of identity compromise. Now, all of these access requests that are coming in, we are looking at it from the user risk, and we are looking at it from sign-in risk. We are also looking at how we can grade the different risk factors as such. Let's say, if you also want to create a level of control where, depending on the risk, you are also automating what is the action that needs to be done. So this is where you have automated remediation that comes into play, right? And as I mentioned earlier, being a singular plane of truth, there are other components that also feed into this particular intelligence. To know if a user is taking a sensitive file from one SaaS application and porting it onto another, you will require a couple of things into play here, right? There are quite a few interplays. You're looking at MCAS, AIP, Azure Active Directory, all of them working together. If you are looking at a threat coming in from, let's say, Azure in terms of ATP, if it is coming in from an attachment from Office 365, for instance, and all of these signals are being fed into this central engine so that you can know how an attack started off, and you can do automated remediations as well for all of these attacks. Now, this is in terms of, we spoke about how you can remediate attacks as such, but even if you're thinking about from a perspective of governance, from the point of inception of that particular identity, which is basically, let's say, a user or a new employee joins an organization. From then on, let's say, you have put this particular equation into some sort of a HR system, and you want to automate the entire process where, depending on the department that this particular person is joining, you would automatically get access to the different applications that that department needs. You also would want to have a mechanism where, if this particular user wants another, or rather want another access to another application, then they can raise this particular access request to the time that this particular user leaves the organization. So if I think about it from the access request part of it, now I know what are the different applications this person has access to. I can then look at how I can consolidate all the information from this particular user, so that there is no chance of information being leaked out of my organization. So now you have a central plane of control to do the entire life cycle. So, as I spoke to you about earlier, passwords are a bit of a problem, and we are absolutely moving away from passwords. But I've got to tell you, I mean, I don't know how many of you have used the Microsoft Authenticator. I hope most of you already have. I hope all of you already have. But, that is something that has made my life very, very simple. In terms of not needing to remember my password is a big boon. I mean, we don't have to change our passwords every 90 days anymore, and we have to do it once a year, right? That's made possible because of how efficient Microsoft Authenticator is, and how you do not need to use a password between your access requests. I can go ahead, whatever resource that I'm trying to look into, could be an application, could be whatever. I'm going to that particular resource. Automatically, it checks if I can be allowed that. Checks again with my authenticator, and depending on the mechanism that you might want to set up, without passwords, you can go ahead and log in. Now, this can be compiled with things like the biometric scan. Of course, you are looking at things like Windows Hello, right? For a laptop, that becomes very, very convenient. And we spoke about how it is seamless for a user. With Windows Hello, it becomes absolutely easy for somebody to open up, start working, right? You can also integrate this with FIDO2 security keys. This becomes very, very interesting if you're looking at hard tokens as such. And if you would want to have, access to something that is more physical, you can do that as well if need be. Right? So you have way more secure sign-in experiences with Azure Active Directory, in order to make sure that, although it is absolutely easy for a user to get into the application that he or she has access to, it is that much more crucial that the security standard is actually maintained, and it's not that somebody else is actually logging in into this particular application or into this particular resource, right? So that particular security benchmark is maintained. Now, single sign-on is something that is absolutely crucial, and it's not a new concept for this. We have a single sign-on concept for all of the applications. That's what we seek to do. Also, you are looking at it from a store, an app store, so to speak, or a centralized app portal, if you will, where a user can go in and check out all the different applications that their organization has. And it could also be grouped up into different types of applications, and the user can, if let's say wants to get access to another application, can go ahead and access it from there itself. So that becomes very, very easy for an end user to work. And especially given remote working, what better way to just say that, hey, just go to the app portal, whatever you require in terms of access is there centralized into that one place, and you can go ahead and start working, right? So that makes life very, very easy. In terms of ID friction, at this point of time, you do not want IT to be burdened with changing passwords, right? So self-service password management is very, very crucial. Even in terms of access requests, you can think about every single access request can be automated in terms of a workflow, which means, let's say, a particular department or a user under a particular department is asking for access for one particular application, you can make the head of department to give the access. For instance, it doesn't necessarily need to always be IT, right? So you can have that sort of automated workflow as well to go ahead and give access, right? That makes it very, very simple because the department is taking care of itself, right? So it is a very it's an approach where you let the employees or the departments be self-sufficient. Now, with all of these things, you're also having a mechanism of how you can review all of the sign-in requests, and that becomes a rhythm for IT so that you understand what are the risky ones, right? And that you can flag out and to look at much more deeply to understand, hey, these are the risky sign-ins that have happened over this particular period of time, and you might want to, let's say, raise the level of risk so that the next time somebody or that particular category comes in, you automatically block or you ask for a particular challenge. Now, in terms of finance, it definitely helps you reduce costs because first of all, you're using all of the components of Azure Active Directory. Right now, single sign-on in itself is obviously a component that reduces a lot of cost because you're not having to maintain different mechanisms of login. As I mentioned earlier, if you think about it from a private app or private on-premise application, you do not have to maintain quite a few things when it comes to VPNs and things like that. You can also think about it from a B2B collaboration perspective, which is, let's say you are working with your vendors, you are working with your partners. That particular piece of it becomes very, very interesting because you can give limited access to those vendors, to those partners, and so that, the continuity remains and you can very, very easily share documents and work with each other, but also maintaining a level of security so that they cannot infiltrate within your organization, right? In terms of device management, in terms of web access management, let's say if you think about it from an Intune perspective, that again becomes very, very easy. It definitely saves up a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of personal, hassles as such, right? I don't need to necessarily get my laptop to the office to get something done, right? So that becomes very, very simple, and very, very efficient from an IT governance perspective. Even higher equations when you think about privileged identity management, where I have to make some changes to a particular application. I have to make changes to a particular scope that I have, and I can define it. I can define what is it that you need to change as an admin. I can define what time do you have access for, and that makes it that much more efficient for me, and it also makes it that much more secure for me, because now I'm very, very sure that even if somebody gets access to an admin account, they cannot get access to a particular application, or they cannot make massive damage to that particular infrastructure, right? So in that way, it definitely reduces a lot of cost. Next, we also look at it from a unified identity management perspective. We are consolidating all of these. So all of the other identity providing platforms or identity providing hardware that you had in place, you do not need that anymore. Now, if you think about it from an ROI perspective, it's about 123% ROI that you get from integrating all of your applications under Azure Active Directory. Now, 50% of reduction comes from the effort that you need to put in for management under IAM. Further, 100% comes in from, if you're looking at it from a perspective of what are the hardware costs that you had to implement, all of that can be taken off at this point of time. And you always have, you have a lot of, because you are reducing the surface area of attack as well, there is 45% lesser chance of a breach actually occurring. So this way, you are absolutely increasing the ROI when it comes to integrating all your apps under AAD. Now, there are three parts. There are three steps to basically take into consideration when you are integrating your apps with Azure Active Directory. First is connect your SaaS applications. And when I say SaaS applications, I'm generally talking about applications that use modern authentication. Second, upgrade your app authentication. Move from ADFS to Azure Active Directory. And finally, integrate your private apps with Azure App Proxy. Now, let's start off with connecting SaaS applications. Now, there are thousands of pre-integrated apps already available in the gallery, and it is very, very simple to go ahead and connect to these particular applications. You are giving your teams to a secure way to access all of these through the portal, through your app portal, and it becomes very, very easy for you to also enforce risk-based conditional access policies on access to these particular applications. Right now, if you do have a particular application that you might want to move, and you would want to see if you have the templates, you can always automate these. So all of these applications can be the moving or into getting into Active Directory can be automated because the APIs are open, and this is also generally available at this point of time. You can have people gain consent, and based on consent you can give an access to application, which is admin consent. So IT can basically take better governance of all of your applications, and that's generally available as well. You can apply conditional access, as I mentioned, onto all of these applications, but you also looking at the context based authentication can also be brought in, and that's in public preview right now. So what that basically means is you have a set of policy under conditional access that has been pushed in for a particular application, but let's say you want to do a particular action item, right? Like for instance, I want to download a sensitive file. Then what happens is I will get a step up access for it, so that I can download that particular file, and then I'll get back to the same policies that I've been following. So based on context, you can define conditional access as well, and that is in public preview at this point of time. Now, second part, upgrade your app authentications from ADFS to Azure Active Directory. Now, this is a huge base of customers who still have ADFS, who have a lot of apps connected to ADFS as well. And as partners, this is something that we can help our customers work with, because we can move this to Azure. Because firstly, in terms of maintenance of ADFS in itself, it is a bit expensive, right? So I can take away all of those costs. Now, if I have to look at all the applications that are connected to ADFS, I will also need to understand the dependencies, and I will need to understand that this entire path from ADFS to Azure App Proxy. How do I ensure that the apps that are connecting to ADFS they do not face any downtime, right? For that, you have a couple of tools. One of the tools that actually helps you look at all of these is Azure AD Connect Health. What you can use is under this, you can actually use the ADFS application activity report to look at what are the different applications that can be moved to Azure Active Directory already. What are the different parameters? It does the check for the apps itself and tells you the feedback in terms of what exactly needs to be done for those particular applications. So it becomes very, very easy for our partners to help our customers move all of these applications to Azure Active Directory. If you are also looking at how I can do this, you already have the ADFS migration app creation scripts and code samples that are already available. So you can use those as well if these applications need to be moved from ADFS to AAD. Right? So the application activity report is generally available already. Please go check it out, and that will definitely help having conversations with the customer and definitely help in the migration process. Now, finally, we also have to look at the private applications. Right now, integrating private applications with Azure AD application proxy. Now, we are looking at securing applications with pre-authentication and enabling conditional access policies for these private applications as well. Now, with this, you can retire all of your VPN or your web app management solutions, and that is definitely a huge cost reduction and maintenance reduction for a particular customer. So definitely it's a valuable solution, right? Now, you have native support under App Proxy for header based or let's say password based integrated Windows authentication, SAML authentication, RDP. All of these have native support. So it's very simple in terms of looking at how you can provide these type of authentications for the legacy authentication protocols and absolutely shift it to Azure AD application proxy. Right now, one of the main important parts of Azure AD application proxy is looking at the internal URL and the external URL. Now, external URL is something that you are basically publishing, and internal URL is how your users used to access this particular application. So for instance, if there is an attack that actually comes in, then your external URL is actually facing it, and because of AAD, all of those attacks never actually reach your on-premise private application. So your private application servers are absolutely kept safe, right? Another thing to note, you can also look at it from a connectors perspective. You can have multiple connectors for a particular application if you have a higher throughput. Like if you have like a lot of traffic that is being used for a particular internal application, you can have 2 or 3 connectors that you might want to place in terms of a connector group, and that makes it much more faster. Another thing that you need to also look at it is from the way the connectors talk to Azure AD application proxy. It's an outbound call, and the connectors are checking your AD app proxy in terms of if there is an access request or not. That again reduces the surface area of attack, and you don't have to create inbound ports that are open and things like that, which could lead to other attacks as well, right? So that definitely is a good measure for reducing the surface area of attack for this. These connectors, now you can optimize the traffic by region, and that is already in public preview, which basically means if you're looking at traffic coming in from different regions, you can optimize the connectors to be coming from that particular region, and you can look at traffic management as such through those connectors. Next, header-based single sign-on is generally available. I will be taking you through as to how you can set up a header-based sign-on for application, a private application, an on-premise application into Azure AD application proxy. So without further ado, let me take you through to the demo. So for this particular demo, I have chosen Oracle PeopleSoft, and this is an internal demo, or rather an internal application that I'll be using. And to connect to this, users generally have to use something like be on the network or use a VPN connection. So to start off with, let's look at the server that we're going to start this off at. Now, I have already done quite a few settings before getting to this part. So there are a few registry keys that you need to add in. If you're looking at a legacy application, you will have to make sure that TLS 1.2 has also been enabled. And a few other things that you have to take care of. Let's say, if there is a firewall between the application and Azure application proxy, then you have to make sure that an outbound HTTPS TCP port is actually opened up. Right. So let's start off with looking at Azure Active Directory. So within my Active Directory, you see that Azure AD Connect has already been set up and the status is enabled, which in essence means that, I'm already moving in all of my users onto the cloud, right? So let me go ahead and click on Azure AD Connect. So there are a few things to note here. Seamless sign-on has been enabled for this particular domain, and you should see that pass-through authentication has been disabled. Now, pass-through authentication is something versus pre-authentication is something that you need to take note of, because if you're using pass-through authentication, you cannot enable conditional access policies on top of just application proxy, right? So you have to make sure that pre-authentication is the mechanism that is selected, right? So now let's go ahead and try moving, or before that, let me just check on the users. So yeah, so in essence of the domain, we see that the identity issue is the same domain that I'm using, and all of these users have already been moved to the cloud as well, right? So the directory has already been synced. Okay, now let's now go back here to the application proxy. Now this is the server that I'm going to be downloading the connector to. So let me go ahead and download the connector service, accept terms and download, and I hit run. Okay, I agree to the terms and conditions. Go ahead and install it. Right, so it will ask you to authenticate. So go ahead and authenticate with the admin account that you have. Right, okay, right, okay. Now, once you have signed in, it's going to continue and it's going to finish the installation for the app proxy connector. Right, so setup has been successful. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to go back to the server that I am looking into. Now, just to make sure that the connector has actually been installed properly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Tools, Services, and there are two services that I might want to have a look at. So here is the first one, which is Azure, AAD Application Proxy Connector Service. And the other one is Application Proxy Connector Updater Service. So these are the two services that need to be enabled. So once you have downloaded and run the connector service, make sure that these services are up here and they're running. Right. So once I have made sure of that, let me go back to my Azure AD. Right. So I have gone ahead and looked at creating the connection between this particular server and my app proxy. Right. Now, because this has already been enabled and I have already, as I mentioned earlier, I've finished all of the registry keys, etc., that needed to be done. Go ahead and hit refresh, and you see that the connector actually shows up for this particular connection that I'm trying to do. Now, once I have finished this, let me go ahead and add an application which is going to be using this particular connector. Right, so I go to Enterprise Applications. I'm going to click on a new application. I'm going to go and use an on-premise application for this one. All right, so let me go click on on-premise application, and I'm going to give it a name. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. Now let me try giving it the internal URL that I already know from my organization. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now, note that the URL, the external URL, takes into consideration the name that you have put in for this particular on-premise application. You can change it if you would want to, right? Another thing to note here is definitely keep in mind pre-authentication is Azure Active Directory. Make sure that that is the setting that is enabled, right? Now, once you have made sure of these settings, you can go ahead and add. And it's going to go ahead and create the new application, right? It's going to create the new on-premise application connector. Now, once this has been created, go back and you see that you're looking at the overview page for this particular application that you've just created. Everything that you need to do from this point on, from a security standpoint, is already there in this particular page itself, right? So first, let me go ahead and assign a few users. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on add user. I'm going to select a group. In this case, I'm going to use my sales group for this and click select. Right, so now I can go ahead and assign this to this particular group. All right, now it's done. Now, once I have finished this, once I have already added users, next I'm going to go ahead and set up single sign-on. For this particular demo, we are going to talk about header-based single sign-on mechanism, right? Now, the select mode, the configure with, has to be Azure Active Directory. Now, let's go ahead and look into the headers. So I'm going to add a new header. And you see that there are two sources that are possible. Obviously, one is based on attribute and the other one is transformation. And under transformation, you have all of the, there are a lot of the common transformation types that are already supported in this particular case. So I'm going to go ahead and select attribute in this particular case and go ahead and give it a name. I'm going to basically use the email. as the attribute, and I'm going to try and get the attribute that I want, and that is the UPN for the user. Okay, let me try searching. Okay, so there is the user principal name that I needed to add in, and I've gone ahead and done that. So once I have added in this particular header that I needed to use, I can go ahead and save this. So it's going to save my single sign-on headers, right? Now, let me go back to the overview page. And once I have set up single sign-on, I have assigned the users and groups. Now it's time to go ahead and create a conditional access policy, right? So I'm going to start off with a new policy here. And I'm going to just name this PeopleSoft policy. And go ahead and add the users into this. I'm going to click on sales and marketing. Right, so once I have added in the users, then next I can go ahead and select the particular app for which I'm going to go ahead and add this conditional policy for. You see that because I'm coming in from the overview page anyway, this particular part is already pre-filled. Then let me go ahead and add the conditions for this, right? So as I mentioned earlier, we were talking about user risk earlier in the session. So I'm going to use user risk itself. Go ahead and click configure yes. And I'm going to just check it for high risk users, right? And go ahead and click done. Right, so now I have gone ahead and made a policy pertaining to high risk users, right? Now, I'm going to go ahead and look at what are the different access controls that I'm going to create for this. We were talking about multi-factor authentication earlier on, so I'm going to say for granting access, you will require multi-factor authentication. Click on that. Click on select, right? Go ahead and enable this particular policy, and this is only for high risk users, right? So whenever there is a high risk user that is coming in, then automatically the multi-factor authentication challenge comes on, right? So now that I've created the policy, go ahead and hit create. Now this has already been created for me. I'm going to go here. And that's how it looks, from looking at assigning users to creating single sign-on to looking at it from a conditional access perspective, right? Now, let me quickly switch on to the user perspective. Right, so I have a different machine in which I have this particular user already trying to sign in. And I'm going to go ahead and click next. I'm going to try and enter the password. Wait, sign in. Right. So I am entering with, my application portal basically. And in this, I see that, Oracle PeopleSoft is already mentioned. So I can go ahead and click on this. And it leads me to the Oracle PeopleSoft software. So I have successfully created, application proxy for an internal application, and you can see the name here as well. And it is using the external connector. It's using the MS appproxy.net connector. And that's about it, right? So we are basically looking at how you do not need VPN connectivity or maintenance of all of those clients anymore, and you can now directly connect to this particular application for your users and people working from home who need to use PeopleSoft. Very, very straightforward to do this, right? So now let's get back just to have the last part of the session, looking at a few of the bifurcations, how we look at different applications and how do you want to go about addressing the different applications. So now let's look at what are the different applications to connect to Azure AD. So it's a very simple way of differentiating it. So what are the different applications that you want to connect? So one is this particular app available in the Azure AD app gallery, right? So if it is available, yes, go ahead and use the pre-integrated apps, and you can use the connectors that are already available. If it is not available within the app gallery as such, then you can use the custom templates in Azure Active Directory as mentioned earlier, and the API is open, so you can automate the moving into Azure Active Directory as well, right? Next, if you're thinking about connecting apps that are using legacy authentication, then you can bifurcate it based on two things, right? One is if it is based on header based, Kerberos, form based, or RDP, as we basically saw. And we also saw header based, and we saw the demo for it. So all of this you can use AD app proxy directly. And what you would want to look at is if it is other protocols like LDAP, NTLM, or if you want to connect to Radius, for instance, then you can integrate with a secure hybrid access partner. So we have a lot of security partners like F5, Citrix, etc., who actually are playing in this particular space. And so you can go ahead and integrate with them and then connect to these particular applications, right? So bifurcation between the type of protocols is necessary in terms of the path that you take for integration. So if you think about it from a developer point of view, right, you're creating a new application, and how would you want to go about using this particular service? Now, it has become very, very easy from a developer standpoint. In terms of app registration or creation, you are looking at a single portal, and that's portal.azure.com. You are looking or working with a singular authentication library, and you can integrate it with multiple client SDKs. From an endpoint standpoint, you're also looking at a singular endpoint that actually matches all of the benchmarks. You can integrate it with obviously your Microsoft identities. It could be your work or school accounts under M365, Office 365 equations, or it could be your personal accounts, and in a manner that is actually very, very prevalent, especially during these times. You can also look at logging in through social accounts for your end customers, and this is a B2C scenario. And during these times, what has also happened, that this particular scenario has become very, very relevant, because sales as an engine has also changed quite a bit, where a lot of the sales that used to happen face to face has now become an online equation, right? So a lot of people are trying to log in using social logins and then go ahead and place orders and things like that, right? So you can do it based on that target audience as well, right? So for developers, please go ahead and start using the APIs, and go ahead and create apps on Azure so that we can connect it through Azure Active Directory. Now, just to summarize it, so you are looking at managing and securing all your apps from one singular location, from one identity, a plane of control, where you can develop the app, publish the app within your app portals, and have users directly access to it. And these could be SaaS apps, this could be other private cloud hosted apps, this could be on-premise apps, as we just saw, and this could be integrated with your HR applications as well to maintain the identity lifecycle. So with that, we have Microsoft Azure Active Directory being a very, very important component in terms of integrating all of your applications together. Now, for partners, there are a couple of next steps that you might want to take note of. To get started, follow the 5 steps for integrating applications with Azure Active Directory. Now, use Azure AD to for all of the new applications, obviously. Prioritize the existing applications to migrate. Now, a couple of them that are already available for you, if there are SaaS applications especially, move it and connect it to Azure Active Directory. Migrate other applications that rely on separate identity providers, right? So you do not need to maintain multiple identity providers within a singular environment. So start migrating those applications. Integrate on-premise applications, as we just saw, using app proxy. And also integrate your applications from a developer point of view, right? So these are the 5 basic steps that we basically look at from moving all the applications connecting to Azure App Proxy, Azure Active Directory. From a support perspective, from a deployment and adoption support perspective, you can also have Fast Track. I know a lot of the partners here are also Fast Track partners. So you can use Fast Track as a service for these deployments. Another thing that we want to definitely emphasize on is the identity workshop for partners, right? So our partners can go ahead and run these workshops for customers. Now, all of these workshop, in terms of the format of it, everything has already been laid out. It starts off from understanding the identity landscape of one particular organization. How are we going to go ahead and consolidate all of this identity? What are the different apps that we can move in terms of discovering all of the apps within the organization, trying to find out which are the apps that can move first, and prioritize different apps, as we mentioned in the 5 steps, right? So for partners, definitely look into the identity workshop for partners, and that's a very good starting point for you to engage with your customers to get this started, to get this journey started. So please take a note of the resources. This is what you will be looking at, and definitely look at the Azure AD demo guides, right? So for guys who would want to go ahead and demo the different scenarios to your customers, please go ahead and have a look at all of these incredible resources. From a migration guidance perspective, aka.ms/migrate apps, application management perspective, aka.ms/app management. From Azure AD video tutorials, if you'd want to have a look into it and study further, aka.ms upgrade ADFS to AAD. From a demo guides, Azure AD demo guides. If you want to look at the Azure AD blog, which automatically has a lot of updates that keep coming in with all of the newer things, newer goodies that we pack into Azure AD, definitely look at aka.ms/Azure AD blog, right? And with that, I would like to end the session and thank you so much for listening in. Have a good day ahead. Thank you.